There's an old motel sitting right in the dead center of America's Route 66, a place that supposedly burned to the ground back in 1987. The police report filed it away as a total loss, 0 survivors. But to this day, late-night drivers who lose their way still swear they see its red neon sign buzzing through the desert fog. And if you make the mistake of checking in to room 13, the knocking starts at 3 a.m. But the most terrifying part, whatever is begging you from the other side of that door, it isn't human. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's story takes us out to the desolate stretches of Arizona, a pitch-black highway, an abandoned motel standing like a ghost in the middle of the desert, and a night that was never supposed to end. People say America's old highways carry their own curses, especially Route 66. Thousands of travelers have chased the horizon down that asphalt, but not everyone made it to their destination. So, if you're listening to this alone tonight, do me a favor, go double-check your locks, because by the time this story ends, you might never want to stay at a roadside motel ever again. My name is Tyler Mitchell. This happened in the summer of 2022. I was making a solo cross-country drive from California to Texas, just me, my truck, and the open road. By the time 1 a.m. rolled around, I had been behind the wheel for nearly 14 straight hours. Fatigue was setting in heavy. I was cruising down a completely deserted stretch of Route 66. Nothing but miles of empty desert on either side. No headlights in my rearview mirror, no streetlights, nothing. Suddenly, my GPS screen flickered and went completely dead. Just a black screen. At the exact same second, my phone lost all service. No signal. I cursed under my breath, smacking the dashboard out of frustration. But right as I looked back up at the road, a faint red glow caught my eye in the distance. Midnight Motel. The neon sign was buzzing, the red letters bleeding into the night sky, flickering erratically. Exhausted and desperate, I figured I'd just crash there until sunrise. But the moment I pulled into the gravel parking lot, an uneasy pit formed in my stomach. The place looked ancient. The paint was peeling like sunburned skin. The windows were coated in thick grime, and the silence surrounding the property was heavy, suffocating. It felt like a place that hadn't seen a living soul in decades. I walked up to the lobby and knocked on the glass door. A few agonizing seconds passed before it slowly creaked open. An old man stood there. His eyes were bead-like and sunken, his face completely devoid of any human expression. He spoke in a low, gravelly rasp. Just one night. Yeah, I replied, pulling out my wallet. He handed me a heavy brass key with the number 13 etched into it. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do not open the door after 3 a.m. I let out a nervous chuckle. Why's that? The old man just stared through me, dead-eyed, before replying, because whatever is knocking out there at that hour, it isn't human. The smile slid right off my face. The moment I stepped inside room 13, the vibe was instantly off. A sagging mattress, yellowed wallpaper peeling at the corners, and the suffocating stench of stale cigarettes and rotting wood. I locked the deadbolt, threw my bags down, and collapsed onto the bed. But sleep wouldn't come. A bizarre sound was coming from the room next door. It sounded like someone was slowly dragging their fingers across the drywall. Scratch, scratch. At first, I tried to ignore it. Just old pipes or mice, I told myself. But then the sound grew louder, sharper. Scratcher! It sounded exactly like fingernails violently scratching against the wall right behind my head. Annoyed and running on pure exhaustion, I banged my fist against the wall. "Hey, keep it down in there," I yelled. Instantly, the scratching stopped. The motel fell into a dead, ringing silence. I let out a sigh of relief, sinking back into my pillow. And then came the knock. Thud, thud, thud. I whipped my head toward my phone on the nightstand. The digital clock read 3:03 a.m. The old man's warning echoed in my head like a siren. Do not open the door after 3 a.m. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Another knock, harder this time. Bang, bang, bang. Then a girl's voice drifted through the wood. "Please help me." My blood ran cold. Her voice was trembling, breaking into desperate sobs. "Please, someone's chasing me. Let me in." Driven by pure instinct, I crept toward the door. I pressed my eye behind the peephole, bracing myself. But as I looked through the lens, my breath hitched. The hallway was completely empty. Nobody was out there. Yet the voice was still speaking, sounding like it was hovering mere inches away from the wood. "Please, just let me in." I took a terrified step backward, and that's when it happened. Something moved into the frame of the peephole. An eye rolled into view, pressed tightly against the glass from the outside. But it wasn't a human eye. It was completely, entirely pitch black. No white, no iris, just a void. I stumbled back, terror seizing my muscles. And then, whatever was on the other side of the door began to laugh. It started as a low, wet giggle, hee 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 hee. But the laugh began to multiply, layering over itself until it sounded like dozens of distorted voices laughing in perfect, sickening unison. Slam! Something violently threw itself against the door. The entire frame shuddered. Slam! 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 I scrambled backward, grabbing the heavy metal desk lamp, wielding it like a weapon. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Then a voice drifted through the door, no longer crying, but dripping with a malicious, mocking glee. "It's okay if you don't open the door." Silence fell over the room for a few seconds, because we're already inside. My entire body went numb. From behind me, the bathroom door began to slowly creak open. Screech! I froze, staring into the darkness of the bathroom. Out of the shadows, something began to crawl into the bedroom light. First came a pair of pale, emaciated hands, then a head. It was a woman, but her arms and legs were snapped and bent backward, contorted into a horrific, arachnid-like crawl. Her eyes were solid black voids, and her mouth was stretched open so wide it looked like her jaw had been violently unhinged. She crawled onto the bedroom floor on all fours, her bones popping with every movement. Then she slowly twisted her head around, locked her dead eyes on mine, and smiled. I let out a blood-curdling scream, dropped the lamp, and bolted for the front door. I ripped it open and sprinted out into the corridor, but the motel had completely transformed. The walls were charred black, covered in soot. The carpet beneath my bare feet was soaking wet and smelled of stagnant water, and every single room door down the hallway was wide open. Inside the darkness of every single room, figures were standing, perfectly still, shadowy silhouettes staring at me. In unison, every single one of them tilted their head to the side at a sharp, unnatural angle. I ran faster than I ever have in my life. Behind me, the sound of hundreds of footsteps erupted. Thud, 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 thud. It sounded like an army of contorted bodies was chasing me down the hall. I burst into the lobby, screaming at the top of my lungs, "Help me! Someone help me!" But the lobby was dead empty. The old man was gone. My eyes darted to the front desk, where a framed, soot-stained photograph was sitting. Trembling, I picked it up. Every ounce of warmth left my body. It was a newspaper clipping of the very motel I was standing in, but the headline printed across the bottom read, "Midnight Motel Fire, 1987. I stared at the black and white photograph of the motel staff and guests. I recognized them, the woman from room 13, the silhouettes from the hallway, and standing right in the center was the old man from the front desk. Right below the headline, a single sentence read, "No survivors." My hands shook so violently, the frame shattered on the floor. And that's when a voice whispered right into the back of my neck, "You're one of us now." I slowly turned around. The old man was standing right behind me, but his eyes were completely black, and his mouth was stretched into that same impossibly wide, unhinged grin. The next morning, a state trooper found me unconscious in a ditch by the side of the highway. When I frantically told them about the Midnight Motel, they looked at me like I was losing my mind. They told me there wasn't a motel out here. There never had been. It's been 4 years since that night. I survived, but I haven't slept a full night since. Because every once in a while, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the knocking starts on my bedroom door. Thud, thud, thud. And from the other side, that same girl's voice whispers through the wood, "Please, let me in."
The next story.
Imagine this. You're sitting completely alone in an isolated log cabin. Outside, there's nothing but thick fog and an ancient pine forest. Suddenly, in the dead of night, a violent, deafening thud rattles the cabin door. Terrified, you peer through the window pane, and there, standing in the fog, is a faceless figure. And right from the hollow void of its face, the rotting features of every dead person you've ever loved begin to emerge one by one. They're all reaching out to you, calling your name in your exact same voice. Tonight, I'm going to share the terrifying true story of what happened to me deep in the woods of Wisconsin. Deep in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, there is a stretch of land that doesn't show up on any modern GPS. It is an ocean of ancient, towering pines, permanently choked in a thick, grey fog that feels almost heavy. The locals up there don't go into those woods. Over cheap diner coffee, they whisper stories about hunters who walked in and just
evaporated. It was as if the moment they stepped beneath the canopy, they vanished into thin air. My name is Daniel. Back in the fall of 2023, I didn't believe in curses or ghost stories. I was 24, drowning in college debt, and desperate enough to apply for a sketchy job listing on Craigslist, a deep woods fire lookout and timber cruiser for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. The pay was a flat $10,000 a month. All I had to do was live in an isolated off-grid log cabin, track tree rot, and monitor fire risks. It sounded like an easy paycheck, a 3-month paid vacation from society. But looking back, if I had known what that forest was actually hunting for, I would have gladly gone bankrupt before ever setting foot in that place. On my first day, the retiring ranger, an old weathered guy named Sam, whose face looked like carved leather, handed me the keys to the cabin. He didn't smile. He just stared right through me with his bloodshot eyes, leaned in and dropped a set of rules that made my skin crawl. "Listen to me closely, son," Sam said, his voice deep, gravelly, and dead serious. "I'm only going to say this once. When the sun goes down, you lock that deadbolt and you do not crack the windows, not even an inch. And if you're sitting here in the dark and you hear a voice calling your name from out there in the trees, you do not answer. I don't care if it sounds like a stranded hiker or if it sounds like your own mother. You keep your mouth shut, because out here, the woods learn, and they love to bait the trap." I laughed it off at the time. I thought it was just some classic hazing, a bit of local folklore to scare the city kid from Chicago. That laugh was the biggest mistake of my life.
The first 7 days were actually peaceful. During the daytime, the Northwoods looked like something straight out of an outdoor gear catalogue. But the moment the sun dipped below the tree line, the entire atmosphere shifted. Have you ever been in a forest that was completely, totally dead? No crickets, no owls, no deer rustling in the brush. Just a suffocating, pressurized silence that pressed against your eardrums until you could hear your own heartbeat. It felt like the forest was holding its breath, listening to my every move. On the 7th night, things got weird. It was exactly 2:14 a.m. I was sitting at the wooden desk, nursing a mug of black coffee and trying to read a paperback book to keep the paranoia at bay. That was when I heard it, a high-pitched, jarring sound of long, sharp fingernails scratching against the glass window pane. Screech, screech. My body locked up. I froze, my eyes darting to the window. Outside, the fog was a solid wall of white. I grabbed my heavy-duty Maglite flashlight, crept over to the glass, and clicked it on. The beam hit the window pane. There was nothing out there, but smeared across the outside of the glass in dark, wet mud were long, jagged drag marks. They weren't from a human hand. The spacing was entirely wrong. They looked like they were made by elongated, razor-sharp talons. As I stared at the mud, the fog shifted. For a split second, I swear to God I saw 2 dull crimson points of light, like burning embers, staring back at me from the darkness. I blinked, and they were gone. I tried to convince myself it was just a black bear or a stray wolf, but deep down in my gut, I knew a bear didn't scratch at a window like a person trying to get your attention. By the 10th day of the second week, the isolation was starting to warp my mind. The weather stayed permanently overcast, a relentless twilight. And that's when the whispering started. It didn't happen in the air, it happened inside the trees.
The branches weren't moving and there was no breeze, but the pine needles were vibrating. The sound coming off them wasn't rustling, it was a chorus of human voices. It sounded like a stadium full of people whispering all at once in a language that wasn't English or European or anything modern. It sounded ancient, native, and primeval. I threw myself onto my cot, burying my head under the pillows and pressing my hands over my ears. I didn't sleep a wink. Around 4 a.m., the heavy, absolute silence returned. Right then, from the porch just inches away from my front door, a voice broke the quiet. It was a woman's voice, tired, weary, and horribly familiar. Daniel, sweetie, please open the door. It's so cold out here. My car broke down on the fire road. Let me in, baby." My breath caught in my throat. The blood in my veins turned to ice water, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. That was my mother's voice. But my mother had died of pancreatic cancer in a Chicago hospice center 5 years ago. I held her hand when she took her last breath and watched her get buried. There was absolutely no way she was standing on a porch in the middle of a Wisconsin wilderness. Drawn by pure instinctual grief, I stood up and moved toward the door. I wanted it to be her so badly. My hand reached for the deadbolt, but right as my fingers brushed the cold metal, Sam's warning echoed in my skull. "I don't care if it sounds like your own mother, you keep your mouth shut, because the woods learn." I pulled my hand back, fell to my knees on the floor, clamped my eyes shut, and started screaming at the top of my lungs. "You're not real! You're dead! Get away from my door!" The moment I yelled, the sweet maternal tone of the voice outside dropped. It dissolved instantly into a guttural, wet, metallic roar that didn't sound human at all. The horrific sound tracked away from the porch and out into the distant woods until it finally faded away. I couldn't close my eyes for the rest of the night.
The next morning, I was done. I didn't care about the 10 grand or breach of contract. I grabbed my backpack and my keys, determined to hike the 5 miles back to the main highway where I'd left my truck. I turned on my government-issued radio to call base, but all that came out was loud, aggressive static. I stepped onto the trail, keeping my eyes glued to the trail markers Sam had shown me. I walked fast, and then I broke into a jog. I checked my watch. 2 hours passed, then 3. I should have reached the highway an hour ago, but as the trees parted, I found myself standing right back in the clearing, facing my own cabin. The trail had looped. No matter which direction I ran, the forest kept funneling me right back to the center of the web. I was completely trapped. By 3 p.m., the sky turned pitch black and a torrential downpour began. The storm knocked out the cabin's solar power. Helpless, I locked myself inside, lit an old kerosene lantern, and sat on the floor, shaking. That's when I noticed an old leather-bound logbook stuffed underneath the desk. It wasn't the official government log. It was a personal journal left behind by the rangers who lived here before me. I pulled it out and began flipping through the yellowed, water-damaged pages. The entries started out normal, weather reports, wildlife sightings, but the further I flipped, the more the handwriting deteriorated. It became frantic and jagged, scratched into the paper with erratic force. I stopped at the very last page. It was dated just 1 week before I arrived, written by a
hand that was clearly trembling. It read, "They aren't spirits, they aren't ghosts. It's the forest itself. It's alive and it's hungry. But it doesn't want your meat, it wants your consciousness. When you die out here, the roots take you and the trees steal your voice. They copy your face. They lure in the next one using the people you love. Daniel, if you're reading this, you are already the bait." The logbook slipped from my numb fingers. Daniel, the entry mentioned my name. How could the previous ranger know my name if he wrote this before I was even hired? And that's when the horrific reality clicked into place. The previous ranger hadn't written this. The forest had. It knew me. It had read my mind, my memories and my fears the moment I stepped across its borders. The whole job, the listing, the cabin, it was all a trap to drive me mad.
Midnight hit, and the storm outside reached a pitch fever. The wind screamed like a dying animal, ripping shingles off the roof. Then came the strike. With a deafening crash, the front window shattered inward, raining glass shards across the floor. The freezing fog poured into the cabin like thick, white smoke. Out of that smoke, something began to crawl through the frame. It was impossibly tall, a skeletal, elongated mass of wet, rotten wood, twisted vines, and black mud. It looked like an old tree root that had torn itself out of the earth and learned to walk on two legs. Its limbs clicked and popped with the sound of snapping branches. But its face, oh God, its face, it didn't have one. Where its features should have been, there was just a hollow, empty void lined with dripping black sap. Paralyzed with pure terror against the back wall, I watched as the sap began to shift and the wood began to mold itself. Pale, rotten flesh sprouted from the bark. A face formed inside the void. It was my mother. Then the face melted, twisting into the wrinkled, leathery visage of old Sam. And then it shifted again, turning into the face of my childhood best friend. From that hollow, shifting throat, all of those faces began to speak at the exact same time, creating a horrific, overlapping chorus that bounced off the wooden walls. "Daniel, don't fight it. There's no loneliness in the roots. We are all one out here. Give us your voice. Give us your face." The thing lunged at me, its wooden talons scraping across the floorboards. The stench of wet earth, rot and copper filled the room. I slipped on the broken glass, my hand scrambling wildly across the floor until my fingers hit something metallic, my Zippo lighter. Beside it lay the tipped-over kerosene lantern, fuel pooling across the dry pine floorboards. With every ounce of adrenaline left in my body, I struck the wheel of the lighter and dropped the flame into the puddle. A massive whoosh of fire exploded into life. The flames instantly caught the creature's dry, rotted wood flesh. It screeched, a sound like 100 people burning all at once, and threw itself backward out of the shattered window, disappearing into the raging storm. I didn't think. I scrambled through the smoke, threw myself out the back door, and ran blind into the dark, freezing night. I didn't follow a trail or look for markers. I just ran, my lungs burning and the skin on my face peeling from the blistering heat of the brush behind me. I don't remember how long I ran. But when the sun finally broke through the horizon, I collapsed onto the gravel shoulder of State Highway 51. A passing semi-truck driver saw my burned, bloody body and called 911. It's been 3 years since that night. I live in Southern California now, as far away from those woods as physically possible. The Wisconsin DNR claimed there was never a cabin out there. They told the police I was just a vagrant who had a psychotic break in the woods and set fire to a brush pile. But I know what I saw, and I know why they paid $10,000 a month. They aren't hiring rangers to protect the forest. They're throwing it sacrifices to keep it from expanding. I still don't sleep well, because every now and then, when the Santa Ana winds blow through the palm trees outside my apartment window, the rustling leaves change, the language shifts, and out of the dark I can hear a voice calling my name from the street corner. And the scariest part, it isn't my mother's voice anymore. It's perfectly, unmistakably my own.